Chapter 4 of the Story of Abraham Lincoln. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by John Leader. The Story of Abraham Lincoln, by Mary A. Hamilton. Chapter 4 Lincoln the Lawyer. 2 years after Lincoln entered the Illinois Parliament, its meetings, which had been held at Vandalia, were transferred to Springfield. In Springfield Lincoln lived for the next 25 years, until he left it to go to Washington as President of the United States. Springfield was a country town, which thought itself rather important. The people paid a good deal of attention to dress. They gave evening parties of a quiet sort, where they played cards and talked politics. The business of the most prominent persons in the town was law. Almost all the members of Parliament were lawyers. Lincoln found that his surveying did not occupy his time, or bring in a very large income. He had studied law books, and knew very nearly as much as most of the young barristers of Springfield. Major Stuart, under whom he had served in the war against Black Hawk, took him into partnership. The partnership was not very successful. Lincoln was rather ignorant, and Stuart was too much occupied with his duties as member of Congress, the American Parliament, to teach him much. After 4 years Lincoln left Stuart and joined another friend, Judge Stephen D. Logan. Logan had made Lincoln's acquaintance at the time of his first unsuccessful candidature for the Illinois Parliament. He had then greatly admired the young man's pluck and good sense, and the cheerful way in which he accepted his defeat. Later he had been struck by the sound reasoning of his political speeches. Logan himself was not only a first-rate lawyer, he was a man of wide education and culture. Abraham learned more than law from him. Even after Lincoln left the partnership and set up an office of his own, the two men remained close friends. Although busy during the winter in Parliament, Lincoln worked very hard at his business. He knew that no one can succeed in anything without hard work, and he saw that to become a really good lawyer would help him in politics, and make him a more useful citizen of the state. Moreover, he understood, more clearly than most men have done, that every deed in life is connected to every other. No man can escape the consequences of what he is and does. Every act and every speech is important. Lincoln was 4 times elected to the Illinois Parliament. That is, he sat in it for 8 years. For 4 years, between 1845 and '49, he was member for Illinois in Congress. In Congress he spoke and voted against the war that was being waged against Mexico. The aim of the war was the conquest of Texas and California. The South urged this because they wanted the number of slave-owning states to be equal to the number of free states. They were always afraid that new states would be created out of the undeveloped territory in the Northwest, and if this were to happen, the slave states would be in a minority in Congress. If Texas were added as a slave state, the slave states would have a majority of 1. There would be 14 free and 15 slave states. The Northern members, for the most part, did not see the point. They did not unite against the Southern demands, and consequently the South succeeded. In the war, Mexico was defeated, and Texas was added to the Union. At the end of his last year of membership, 1849, Lincoln applied for a post in the government office. Why he did so it is difficult to understand, for it would have put an end to his political career, as officials may not sit in the House. Fortunately, his request was refused. He returned to his home in Springfield, where he lived in a big, plain house, painted a dirty yellow, with a big piece of untidy garden behind, and a small field at the side. He had married 7 years before, and had now 3 sons. He was devoted to these boys, and used to play all sorts of games with them as they grew bigger. For the next 5 years he devoted himself mainly to his work as a lawyer. He was now 40 years of age. In Springfield and everywhere in Illinois he was admired, respected, and loved. But the high opinion of other people never made him easily satisfied with himself. To the end of his life he never stopped working and learning. he now resolved to become a really good lawyer. He knew that in law he could learn the art of persuading people, and of expressing clearly what he wanted to say. To help in this he took up the study of mathematics with extraordinary energy. Examining his own speeches, he seemed to find in them some confusion of thought. To make his own ideas clear, and to be sure that he expressed them clearly and truly, and never conveyed to others an impression that was not true, he bought a text-book of Euclid. The first 6 books of this he learnt by heart. He said, "I wanted to know what was the meaning of the word 'demonstrate.' Euclid taught me what demonstration was." After a year or two Lincoln was regarded as the equal of any lawyer in Springfield. He had one weakness, however. If he did not believe in the justice of his case, or if he thought the man for whom he had to speak was not quite honest, he did not defend well. His friend Judge Davis says, "A wrong cause was poorly defended by him." A story is told of a man who came to Lincoln's office and asked his help in getting $600 from a poor widow. Lincoln listened to the man, and then said, "Yes, there is no reasonable doubt but I can gain your case for you. I can set a whole neighborhood at loggerheads. I can distress a widowed mother and her 6 fatherless children, and thereby get for you $600 which rightfully belong, as it appears to me, as much to them as it does to you. I advise you to try your hand at making $600 some other way." Everyone in Springfield valued honest Abe's opinion. All sorts of people brought their troubles to him. His sympathy and his tenderness of heart made them trust him. He was one of the people. He never felt himself above them. To the end of his life he did not grow proud, and he was never ashamed of his early poverty. When he was President he told some of his friends of a dream he had had, which might very well have been true. He dreamt that at some big public meeting he was walking through the hall up to the platform from which he was going to speak. As he passed, a lady sitting at the end of one of the rows of seats said to another sitting next to her, so loudly that he could hear, "Is that Mr. Lincoln? Why, he looks a very common sort of person." "I thought to myself in my dream," said Lincoln, "that it was true, but that God Almighty seemed to prefer common people, for he had made so many of them." Nothing in Lincoln is more truly great than his power of seeing the value of common things and common people. He knew that the things which appeal to men as men, which are common to humanity, are the most valuable of all. He counted on this when he abolished slavery. Freedom is a right common to all men, and there is somewhere in everyone an instinct which knows that it is wrong to make other people do things which are too disagreeable to do yourself. During these years at Springfield, Abraham read a great deal. Shakespeare and Burns were his favorite poets. He knew Shakespeare better than any other book except the Bible. He read and thought unceasingly about politics, and he talked about them with his friends. The history of America he studied until he knew everything there was to know. Above all, he thought about slavery. Events were taking place that made it plain that the question of slavery could not be left where it was. It was no longer possible to act as if the difference between North and South did not exist. As years went on, the difference became more and more plain. The North, which had been poor and barren, only half cultivated by ignorant and uneducated settlers, was growing richer than the prosperous, lazy South. Workmen came to the North from all parts of the world, poor men with good brains and strong arms, ready and able to work intelligently, to improve the land, to make wheat grow where stones and bushes had been. None of these men went to the South, for their work was done by slaves so cheaply that no paid worker had a chance. But the difference between the intelligent labor of free men working for themselves and the mechanical labor of slaves working for their masters soon began to tell. In the North schools sprang up everywhere. The people became better and better educated. Men who had grown up in the backwoods, like Abraham Lincoln, taught themselves and rose to be lawyers and statesmen by their own efforts. Others